This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now today, markets are looking beyond the spread of the Omicron variant as a number of central bank decisions are due this week. MSCI's index of emerging market stocks fell 0.7% on the day, with Chinese stocks, which of course make up more than a third of the index, weighing the most. On the continent, pretty muted day. South Africa's JSE closed in the red, with the industrials and financials leading the losers list today. Now also coming up on today's show. Nigeria rescinds its decision to cancel flights from some countries, including the UK. Lawmakers in the DRC call for the removal of an unpopular phone tax. And we meet the young South African who is not just looking at profit margins, but jobs for his peers as well. Well, we begin today's show in Nigeria, where the government is putting its travel ban retaliation plans on hold. This comes barely 48 hours after it had issued a press release to ban inbound flights from the UK, Canada, and the UAE. Now, the sanctions that were to take effect this Tuesday are withheld for further negotiations. Well, CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam brings us the latest from Abuja.
A 9-month-long tit-for-tat between Nigeria and the UAE has left many passengers like Chini Joe hanging in the balance. What started out as a row over COVID-19 testing protocols by UAE national carrier Emirates culminated into its ban from entering Nigeria. The UAE is among other countries that added Nigeria to their travelers' red list over the new Omicron variant, actions which continue to heighten the uncertainties for travelers like Chini.
I was supposed to go and buy goods that I will sell at this time, because this is like peak period for my business. So that has been greatly affected.
Nigerian government had already primed its retaliation and scheduled Tuesday to begin banning flights from the UK, Canada and Saudi Arabia. But it's rescinding its decision and instead opting for diplomatic resolutions.
While each country is entitled to put in place measures to protect its citizens, Nigeria has similar responsibilities as well. However, based on existing relationships, Nigeria has initiated diplomatic steps to make these countries reverse their course. This is ongoing in the interest of all parties concerned, and we expect that positive results would emerge within the next 1 week.
Experts believe that though the West African nation has a duty to protect its sovereignty and integrity, there are no winners in a tit-for-tat.
When you continue to promote travel ban, you are reducing potential financial growth. I believe that Nigeria should be diplomatic, which I've seen that federal government of Nigeria is doing with the rest of the country, and also put on the table a countermeasure.
Already, the imbroglio has cost governments and businesses millions of dollars, according to Nigeria's Travel Agencies Association. For now, Nigeria says it would defer its pronouncement until December the 20th, with hopes of an amicable resolution. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, at the same time, the UK has removed all 11 Southern African nations from its red list, effective from early Wednesday morning. The African nations include Angola, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Nigeria, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. The list was introduced in late November after the emergence of the Omicron variant. However, health authorities say it is no longer necessary as the new strain has spread widely across the world. Now, temporary testing measures for international travel will be maintained. Currently, citizens from red list nations must pay for and self-isolate in a pre-booked government-approved hotel for 10 days. The UK's travel bans against these nations led to an outcry from the affected countries. And moving on now, rising fuel prices in South Africa are driving up the cost of the most basic commodities in the country, making it difficult for many to get by. Now, food prices have seen the steepest escalation, with most South Africans already spending a big chunk of their income on food. Well, CGTN Sumitra Naidu takes a look at the latest household affordability index.
Fuel prices in South Africa shot to a record high this year in line with higher oil prices. Motorists are now paying around $1.33 per litre of petrol. This has filtered through to all industries, having the largest impact on food.
Over the past year, we have seen the petrol price, the fuel price in South Africa increase by over 30%. Fuel is such a major input into the productive and manufacturing process that it inevitably, when there's an increase in fuel prices, it increases almost everything in the economy that is produced.
The situation is worse in Johannesburg, the economic capital of South Africa. Being inland means higher transport costs. According to the latest Household Affordability Index, the average basket of basic goods rose 6.3% in November compared to last year at the same time. On a month-on-month basis, the price of the basket was lower in all other regions except in Johannesburg.
We have to look at household expenditure versus household levels of income to see at what stage there is affordability. And so we have to look at, for instance, the most basic household expenditure. Electricity prices over the past year increased by about 15% across the country. We have seen transport increase by roughly around 8% across the country.
A basket of basic food items came in at $285 last month. Experts are expecting this to be higher over the festive season.
When I revisited my banking app, I actually noticed that over the past 2 months, the bulk of my spending seems to emanate from food and food alone. Because of these fuel price hikes, I travel less frequently now because I've found myself having to pay 200 to 300 rands more to fill up my car, It's ridiculous.
Meat and liquor prices have also escalated.
Going into the festive season, we expect that will have a negative impact on shopping activity. So retail sales for November and December aren't expected to perform that well compared to at least where we were last year. And if you also combine this with the fact that we are now starting to see interest rates rising.
With the impacts of COVID still weighing heavily on the workplace, there's likely to be less cheer this holiday. Some experts believe fuel prices will rise further in the new year as more industries start to scale up again. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, as if that's not enough, South Africa's struggling state-owned power utility, Eskom, has applied for a 20.5% electricity tariff raise for the financial year that starts in April 2022. Eskom cites an expected rise in spending on power supplied by the independent producers, a carbon tax, and also coal procurement costs, amongst other reasons why it should be granted the sharply higher tariff. From Johannesburg, here's Angelo Coppola with the details.
Energy regulator NERSA rarely grants Eskom the full amount it applies for, but the size of the latest request means electricity users in Africa's most industrialized economy could face unaffordably high power bills next year.
If you take the energy contribution, electricity contribution to the consumer basket, what you and I spend in a month on electricity, the consumer basket estimates just less than 5% comes from your electricity component. If you add 20% to 5%, that adds 1% to inflation.
And it doesn't stop there. The South African Reserve Bank would be obliged to act to keep the inflation rate below the 6% upper end target.
And if the South African Reserve Bank's MPC has to respond, that would mean 1% additional interest rate response in terms of adjustments to what the MPC would be doing to interest charges.
Future short-term prospects for the state utility remain bleak, regardless of what percentage tariff increase it gets from the regulator.
We've got energy insecurity, that load shedding remains the order of the day. And it's also the case that alongside that energy insecurity, you've got financial fragility at Eskom, and you've got operational fragility. So we remain in a precarious position.
If Eskom gets its way, or even close to the amount that it's asking for that tariff increase, it's going to put many South Africans deeper into the poorhouse. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And now let's take a look at our corporate headlines today. South Africa has rejected state power provider Eskom's request to remain exempt from pollution standards on some of its coal-fired power stations. The heavily indebted provider says it cannot afford the technology required to meet them. It has also warned that the rejection could see it close more than a third of its power generation capacity. Eskom, of course, supplies almost all of South Africa's electricity. Meanwhile, MTN Group's Nigerian unit has been awarded a 5G license in Africa's most populous country. According to the Nigerian Communication Commission, MTN Nigeria won one of the two licenses on offer at an auction on December 13th. The winning bid price was $273 million, which is $76 million above the $197 million reserve price, which was set before the auction. The second license was granted to Mafab Communication, beating Bharti Airtel's Africa unit. And Toyota Motors has committed $70 billion to electrify its automobiles by 2030. The world's biggest car maker is planning to invest half of the money to develop a battery electric vehicle lineup. That is, as it looks to tap a growing market for zero-emission cars. Now, Toyota expects annual BEV sales to reach 3.5 million vehicles by the end of the decade, or around a third of its current vehicle sales. And finally, Tesla CEO Elon Musk has announced that the electric car maker will begin accepting payments in Dogecoin for some of its products. The price of Dogecoin surged following the news, rising more than 14% in the space of just a few minutes. Now, Musk's announcement comes just a few months after Tesla backtracked on a decision to accept payments in Bitcoin, citing environmental concerns about the way the cryptocurrency is mined. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, but still coming up on the show. We look at why Nigerians should brace for their most expensive Christmas yet. And Tanzania's Serengeti Breweries launches a spirit-making facility staffed entirely by female workers.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, a parliamentary commission in the Democratic Republic of Congo has recommended that the government scrap an unpopular phone tax. It says it has not been able to trace the funds it raised so far. Now, the levy was introduced by the Telecoms Ministry last year. It was meant to help raise funds for Congo's telecoms regulator to be able to register mobile phones and other devices in a secured central registry. Now, after a hearing last week, the Congolese Parliament's Budget and Finance Commission urged the government to put a definitive end to the levy. Congo's telecoms minister, on the other hand, has defended the levy in the past. He says it was needed to remunerate the regulator for the secured central registry. Well, let's now get the details on this story. We are joined by Chris Ochamringa. He joins us in Kinshasa. Great to have you with us on the show, Chris. Now, of course, this phone tax, it was already widely unpopular in the country since it was implemented back in 2020. It even caused protests early this year. Give us some background on this levy and certainly why people in DRC are against it.
Well, the mobile device registry tax, which is widely known here as RAM, was introduced by the Minister of Posts and Telecommunication in September 2020. The minister gave 3 reasons for introducing this bill. The tax. One was that it was supposed to limit the importation of counterfeit phones in the DRC. The second was it was supposed to help reduce phone thefts. And third was it was supposed to improve the overall quality of the phone network. Now, there are some legal experts in the DRC who said that this tax was introduced, had a number of irregularities in the way it was introduced. They were saying that under the DRC law, any tax introduced is supposed to be clearly indicated in the budget. That didn't happen in this case. They also said that the body that's supposed to collect this tax is supposed to be different from the body that spends it. And that also didn't happen. And so these legal experts mobilized the public, people in the opposition, civil society, and other members of the general public to oppose this tax. And that is why there were a lot of protests held from last year by people from all walks of life in the DRC, urging the government to stop, putting this huge burden on them. The DRC has a population, a very large population that's living in poverty. According to the World Bank, about 73% of the DRC's population lives on less than $2 a day. And so many of these people have been struggling to just get by. And so they felt that the government was very unfair, especially at this time that, the COVID-19 has brought another, negative impact on their livelihoods. And that is why there has been so much opposition to this bill. And so this recommendation by the Parliamentary Commission, the Budget and Finance Commission, comes as a big relief to millions of Congolese who have been struggling to survive.
And of course, the accusations from Parliament, they're quite serious. They say they could not trace the funds either in the general budget or in the special accounts. Now, has the government responded yet as to where those funds are? And is there any sign that they will follow the Commission's recommendation to basically end that levy?
Well, I got in touch with the Minister of Communication to get his response about this serious, accusation by the Parliamentary Commission, but he did not respond. And right now, we are not sure. It's not clear what the government is going to do, whether they're going to return this money. But what we know, in the past, the Minister of Posts and Telecommunication was summoned in Parliament, and he said that they're going to use this money, to put this money to proper use. It's about $266 million that has been collected since September last year. Some MPs are saying this money has already been misused, and they have been asking, to see where it went. And the minister said they're putting it to good use. They're going to provide some free internet in parts of the DRC to Congolese people, but very many opposition members disagreed with that and said that this money has already been spent in a very irregular manner.
Well, also, they did say the income from this tax was meant to be split between several parties, the government, the regulator, a private service provider who has been recruited to implement the setup of that central registry, and of course, telecom operators in the country. What are these other stakeholders saying about Parliament's findings?
Well, these stakeholders have been very quiet about these findings because this is a very controversial thing. For very many months, the DRC government has been sticking to its guns that it will not scrap this tax, and that it's very important, to get revenue for developing the country. And so these stakeholders, most of them are foreign players who are trying, to make some money in the DRC. It's a controversial issue, and many of them are very wary about, ruffling the government's feathers. So they're still monitoring the situation. There has been no word from them, but we expect some communication to come out in due course.
Now, there is discussion on how, or rather about how this tax has impacted Congo, the DRC's telecom sector. We know the number of mobile connections in the country, it's been growing quite fast. Some estimate that it grew by nearly 1 million between 2019 and 2020. How has this tax impacted that growth?
Well, according to a study carried by an audit firm known as Ernst & Young, this tax had a very negative impact on the use of mobile phones in the DRC. It said it really reduced the number of phones in the country. Currently, according to the DRC government, there are about 440 million users of phones in the DRC. So they said that because of this tax, many people, the phones became expensive and many people stopped using phones. They also said that it proved an hindrance to the digital inclusion in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There are quite a number of people who have been making money from, using their phones, sending mobile money to different parts of the country. But because whenever they had credit in their phones, it was taxed by the government, and that meant some of them could not continue to break even. They had to move out of the business. So it certainly had a negative impact in the telecommunications sector in this country.
Well, we do have to leave it there. Many thanks, Chris, for those great insights. That is Chris Ochambringa joining us there in Kinshasa, DRC. Well, let's head to Tunisia now. The country is forecasting its national income will grow by 6% by 2035 on the back of increased trade, and that's following the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, authorities are optimistic that the share of Tunisian exports to Africa will climb from the current 11% to reach 19% of total exports during the period. Here's Adnan Shaushi with more from Tunis.
The removal of tariff and non-tariff barriers and the adoption of a trade facilitation across the continent is expected to drive the growth of Tunisia's economy. The country's Trade and Export Development Minister, however, called for safeguards to ensure the proper functioning of AFCFTA, including the adoption of measures to prevent anti-competitive practices while guaranteeing access to investment.
Tunisia would be one of the main beneficiaries of the advantages brought by the African Free Trade Area. The share of Tunisian exports to Africa will increase by 91% to reach 19% of total exports in 2035, compared to about 11% currently. We cannot reach this objective without a clear roadmap and regulations at the national and African levels.
The Director of Cooperation with Africa at the Ministry of Trade in Tunisia described the AFCFTA agreement as a promising alternative to redress the economic situation at the continental level. The expert added that this project will also boost economic activity in the North African state.
One of the main objectives of AFCFTA is to limit or remove export tariffs. This advantage will allow all members to export products at a competitive price. There are many opportunities for exporting companies throughout Africa. It will revive production, continental transport, and create job opportunities.
Tunisia was chosen by the German International Cooperation Agency GIZ among 7 pilot countries and members of the African Union to benefit from a support program for the implementation of the AFCFTA.
The aim of this program is to strengthen the capacities of Tunisia in the public and private sectors. For the private operators, GIZ works with the Confederation of Business Owners. As for the state operators, we work with the Ministry of Trade and other Tunisian parties involved in the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, from the negotiation to the implementation in Tunisia and Africa.
According to the Export Promotion Agency, Tunisia needs to overcome the difficulties that could delay the application of the AFCFTA agreement. The North African state also needs to develop the logistical infrastructure while strengthening the diplomatic and commercial presence in Africa.
Economists assert that the African Continental Free Trade Area is a comprehensive project that goes beyond the traditional trade agreement. Tunisia ratified the AFCFTA agreement in July 2020. The Ministry of Trade and Export Development will establish the lists of products that will be exported to other African countries. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, this year's Christmas festivities in Nigeria could become the most expensive in the country's history. Millions of consumers are now facing a dramatic increase in prices of basic commodities and living expenses. CGTN's Philly Haza has more details from Abuja.
It's Christmas shopping time at this market in the heart of Abuja city. But for many buyers, the increase in prices is putting many of the things they want out of reach.
It's really bad. Everything has gone twice the price it used to be before.
The market should be bubbling, right? But what do we see here? The market is scanty. So people are just trying to manage their reserves till Christmas Day.
At major festivities like Christmas, higher demands from consumers push prices of commodities up. But many people say this is the worst year in recent memory. An increase of up to double last year's import duty by the Nigeria Customs Service has many importers raising the prices of commodities brought into the country. And as the country began recovering from last year's pandemic-induced recession, inflation has reached 16%, cooking gas has increased 200%, electricity and fuel prices have increased as well.
The fact is that government has problems of having very low revenue base. Now, before now, we used to have up to production capacity of about 2.2 million barrels per day, production of oil. But today, we are not even doing up to 1.4 million barrels per day. So we can't even reach our OPEC limit given to us. And so that has affected our inflow of revenue of foreign currency.
And since Nigeria largely depends on imported goods, this has affected the prices of goods at the markets. This new reality could continue shrinking the purchasing power of millions of Nigerians. Nearly half of the country's population lives in poverty, with the minimum wage below $80 per month.
We need to look at all the sectors we have and make sure they are functional and they are efficient. If they are not efficient, there's no money that's going to come from those areas. We need to be looking out of, we can't continue with lip service of saying we have to diversify. I don't even say that anymore. The issues of diversification are there. The avenues of diversification are there. So what we need to do is to make them efficient so that we can start generating revenue from them.
The government has reiterated its commitment to boosting other sectors of the economy aside from crude oil. That's part of its plan to lift about 100 million Nigerians from poverty within the next 10 years. In the meantime, many people are taking a good hard look before they make their choices this holiday season. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And heading to Tanzania now, where a drink company called Serengeti Breweries has launched a spirit-making facility staffed entirely by female workers. Well, as CGTN's Daniel Kijo reports, the move by the Diageo-owned unit is aimed at accelerating diversity in the workplace.
Selena Tarimo's dream was to make her late mother proud. To do so, she started an internship program at Serengeti Breweries, one of Tanzania's biggest companies. The internship led her to getting a job at the company's all-women spirits plant.
Just make sure you have something.
My mother told me just make sure you have something so you can earn something on your own. So the moment I got this job, I wished she was here so I could tell her. I would have loved to see how happy she would have been to find out I got the job.
Yes, I got the job.
The women were recruited through the company's STEM program that aims at training and providing career opportunities to women.
They run the line. It's one of the most sophisticated lines we have. They maintain the line, so they do all the engineering activities. They plan for themselves at the end of the day. So every single aspect, including even having a forklift driver. So they are doing absolutely everything. So it's that confidence that is building in them.
So far, the plant produces SPL's first local spirit brand, Bongodon, and is tasked with producing future spirits innovations for the company. The 15-member team here says that the $6 million all-women plant has changed their lives. Through introducing other spirits and gins, the company is now expecting to increase the number of job opportunities of the company in Moshi to 500 employees. According to the Integrated Labor Force Survey, Tanzania's women account for 52% of the working-age population, but the labor force participation rate is higher among men. Women also constitute a greater proportion of the economically inactive population. SBL's management says work needs to be done to increase women's participation.
Building also confidence with the community and with the fathers and mothers to allow their daughters to actually go and take up those roles, those technical courses which they are passionate about, and they can actually make a difference. And that's something that we're also now starting to talk to technical institutions to see how we can also start shaping the narrative with them from an early point of their learning careers.
Tanzania's population is projected to reach 70 million by 2025. It's hoped that these women can inspire further moves towards equality in labor market in that time. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Moshi, Tanzania.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still to come on the show. A conference in China emphasizes that houses are for living in, not for speculation, as the country deals with high property prices. And consumers in the U.S. turn to alternatives as Christmas trees become more expensive and harder to find this year.
Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, and trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
And now here is a quick recap of other headlines this hour. At least 50 people have been killed and dozens more injured after a truck carrying fuel exploded in the northern Haitian city of Cap Haitien. Now, the explosion occurred late on Monday. Local officials and health authorities have been pleading for supplies and staff to help treat the victims. 3 days of national mourning have been decreed throughout the territory in memory of those victims of this tragedy. And the World Health Organization says Africa has experienced an 83% surge in new COVID-19 cases over the past week. This is attributed to both the Delta variant and the new Omicron variant. Now, the WHO Africa Regional Office revealed today that while the spread is fast, coronavirus deaths remain pretty low, dropping by 19% last week compared with the previous week. Meanwhile, Tunisian President Kais Saied has said a constitutional referendum will be held next July with parliamentary elections to follow at the end of 2022. Now, the president laid out the timeline for his proposed political changes in a televised speech. He said the referendum will take place following an online public consultation that will start in January. And finally, Libya's election commission has delayed the announcement of the final list of presidential candidates until some court cases are resolved. Now, appeals against some presidential candidates and the election law have been filed in Libyan courts. This means the list of candidates for the 24th December election cannot be prepared until final verdicts are reached in those cases. And that's a recap of other headlines this hour. And now to some international news. It has been about 3 days since deadly twisters hit 6 states in the U.S., Midwest and South. Kentucky is by far the worst hit. Well, Dan Williams reports from Mayfield, one of the hardest hit towns, where residents are said to be without heat, water or electricity for weeks or longer amid frigid temperatures. The death toll currently stands at 88.
Canine sniffer dogs search through the rubble of what was once a restaurant, looking for survivors. The search and rescue operation is continuing following Friday night's devastating tornadoes. Although Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear says if survivors are found at this point, it would be a miracle. At his daily news conference, he struggled to fight back tears.
18 are still unidentified. Of the ones that we know, the age range is 5 months to 86 years, and 6 are younger than 18.
President Biden approved a major disaster declaration for the state overnight, clearing the way for federal funds to supplement local recovery efforts. On Wednesday, he will visit here to see the damage for himself.
I don't want to be in the way. There's a lot going on, and when the president shows up, there's a long tail to follow, an awful lot of folks, and I just don't want to do anything other than be value added.
The destruction caused by the series of tornadoes is difficult to comprehend. Block after block has been completely destroyed. Many of the buildings that are left have been damaged beyond repair. The long process of cleaning up is already underway.
To me, they need to take a bulldozer a mile that way with a blade 100 foot wide and clear everything out all the way 2 miles that way.
Wayne Flint's restaurant was completely destroyed, but he counts himself lucky to be alive.
Well, all of a sudden I felt my truck going doing this. I said, well, Mike, my brother, I said, we're done. We're going to die right here on this road.
Complicating matters for Flint is that his business was underinsured after cutting back coverage when his income fell sharply amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
You might have been making $1,000 a day, and when that started, now you're making $150 a day. You can't pay higher price insurance if there's no money coming in. You know, I mean, that's not even make good sense. And I know of a lot of businesses here in Mayfield that's not covered.
Although the cleaning up process has begun, rebuilding may take much longer. Dan Williams, CGTN, Mayfield, Kentucky.
Now, this tragic tornado disaster is expected to result in immense economic consequences for the U.S. Insiders estimate the loss will be in single-digit billions, but it is uncertain how high at this stage of the event, response and, of course, recovery. In the meantime, collateral damages could also be an astronomical number. The state of Kentucky is an important logistics hub due to its geographic location. Kentucky's state cabinet for economic development says the state is located at the center of a 34-state distribution area. The tornado outbreak has disrupted operations of logistics firms, with Christmas just around the corner. Now, elsewhere, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says he is seeking a free and open Indo-Pacific. Blinken's comments came in Indonesia, the first leg of a tour of Southeast Asia, the latest visit to the region by a senior U.S. official in recent months. In a speech outlining the U.S. approach to the Indo-Pacific, the Secretary of State said that Washington will look to expand its military and economic relationships to counter China's growing influence in the region. Now, Blinken especially expressed concern over what he called China's aggressive actions. He, however, stressed that Washington was not trying to force countries to choose between the U.S. and China, or neither was he seeking conflict. Meanwhile, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has responded to Blinken's remarks, saying the U.S. stance will only stir up confrontation and, of course, pose threats to Asia's stability. Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said the U.S. side is exaggerating the so-called China threat and at the same time insisting it does not intend to have a conflict with China. He argued that this contradictory practice is inconsistent with the spirit of dialogue between the leaders of the two sides. Well, let's shift focus now to France, where the government is considering tighter restrictions on travelers from the UK. The move comes as both nations try to tackle and reduce outbreaks of the COVID Omicron mutation. Currently, in order to enter France from the UK, all travelers, regardless of their vaccination status, must provide a negative COVID test taken within 48 hours of the departure time. Now, this rule applies to all travelers over the age of 12, including French citizens and residents. At least one person has died in the UK after contracting the Omicron variant, marking the first publicly confirmed death globally. So far, France has 133 Omicron cases, but is also bracing for a new COVID-19 wave to hit in January. Well, let's stay in France. An appeals court in the country on Monday ordered the Swiss bank UBS to pay a fine of about $2 billion for helping rich clients evade taxes. Now, UBS took the fight to the Paris appeals court after being initially hit with around $5 billion in fines and damages in a 2019 ruling. Which of course was France's biggest ever tax evasion penalty. The court found UBS guilty of concealing serious tax fraud and illegal banking activities in France between 2004 and 2012, when it was sending Swiss bankers to woo well-heeled French clients. Now, UBS has denied any wrongdoing, and it says it will appeal the latest ruling to from France's highest court. Shares in UBS were up 1.5% in mid-afternoon trading after the ruling was handed down. Well, running a home in India has been getting more and more expensive. The price of cooking oil is up by a third, and other kitchen essentials such as cooking gas and vegetables are getting pricier. It is putting more pressure on people who are still reeling from the pandemic. Here's Radhika Bajaj reporting from Mumbai.
Sangeeta Satkar has been using cooking oil judiciously these days. As a cook for hire, COVID-triggered restrictions led to loss of earnings for her, and now increased prices of kitchen staples like oil, milk, onions, tomatoes and more have further dented her limited savings.
Because of COVID lockdowns, many employers reduced my salary, but expenditures has been going up. I managed to save only half what I used to save earlier.
A year-on-year comparison shows that prices of edible oils and fats are up by 33%, while pulses are costlier by nearly 5.5%. Through the months of September and October, retail inflation figures have been around 4.5%, lower than the central bank's upper threshold of 6%. Statistically, food inflation has been benign, but on the ground, pricier food items are leading to higher household budgets.
The last 1.5 months saw a combination of some bit of festive demand as well as unseasonal rains in the country, which hit the crop production and its availability. And remember that we also, have seen high logistics costs a bit on the back of higher fuel costs. So ultimately, everything would get passed on to the consumer, and that is essentially what has happened. So while on the headline we saw benign inflation, sequentially prices did move higher.
While the federal government did cut excise duties on fuel, state governments haven't entirely passed on that benefit to customers. On the manufacturing side too, besides freight, input costs have been higher, leading to elevated retail prices. Experts say these are unlikely to drop even after input costs stabilize. To manage inflationary pressures, India's central bank recently halted its GSAP program, a dedicated liquidity window through which it buys sovereign papers to infuse cash into the market. But experts say, in light of the Omicron variant, any further plans to manage liquidity may be postponed.
I think sequentially, we're going to see that there's been a halt to the GSAP auctions. Next would be the reverse repo, and then it will go into the region of increasing the repo rate. But as of now, I think there will be a pause on all ends. So therefore, it will be a status quo in terms of policy.
With no clarity on how much of a break Omicron could put on a recovering economy, policymakers could adopt a wait-and-watch strategy, which means that higher prices could prevail for some more months, a hardship that for many is increasingly becoming hard to swallow. Radhika Bajaj, CGTN, Mumbai.
Now, participants at the recent Central Economic Work Conference in China reiterated that houses, in quotes, are for living in and not for speculation, end quotes. Well, our reporter Juju talked to the industry experts to find out how the country's property sector can achieve healthy growth under government guidelines.
Chinese authorities have reaffirmed that the country stands on the property sector several times this year and stated that the main objective is to stabilize land and home prices and market expectations. This is also the 5th consecutive year that the authorities are insisting that housing is for living in and not for speculation. Industry experts say that financial institutions should keep a close eye on property regulations and land purchases.
Property developers normally will require bank financing to do the land acquisition. So I think the commercial banks or other financial institutions, when they prepare the bank facility to such property developers, they can have a very close eyes on such plan to see whether the plan involves any speculations in property or even in land. When they launch the property development plan or when they embark on a sale, we need to look at the price target set out by the property developers to see whether there would be any speculation involved.
Earlier, China's top legislature also authorized the State Council to pilot property tax reforms in certain regions, aiming to guide rational use of land resources and facilitate steady development of the property market.
Basically, the government needs to closely examine the financial soundness of such property developers and their development plan to see whether such plan is to serve the genuine demand of ordinary citizens. Normally, the property developers would acquire bank financing to do the land acquisitions. So basically, financial institutions such as banks can also have a second look of the financial soundness of such property developers.
The country's measures to stabilize the property market seem to have gradually paid off. Data from the State Council shows that in October, the year-on-year increase in prices of newly built commercial housing fell by 0.3 percentage point in first-tier cities, while second-hand home prices declined by 1 percentage point. In second-tier cities, the drop was 0.4 percentage point for commercial housing and 0.5 percentage point for second-hand homes. Zhuzhu, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, in the U.S., Christmas trees are now more expensive and apparently harder to find this year. Disruptions to the supply chain, along with record temperatures, have sent the price of both real and artificial trees soaring. Now, some customers are now searching for alternatives, as Hendrik Seabrandy reports from Denver.
In the U.S., trees and Christmas go together like apple and pie. But this season's supply chain issues that have affected many parts of the economy have hit this industry too. A challenge for families that rely on that homey holiday feeling that trees provide this time of year.
What a better catalyst for that than a tree like ours that provides this whimsical, interesting experience.
Matt Bliss is the founder of the Modern Christmas Tree, a futuristic-looking creation made of concentric acrylic rings that's caught on with many tree buyers.
What we're doing is we're providing an interesting centerpiece to the holidays, and for the right person who values, good design.
It was Bliss's grandfather, Lawrence Bud Stoker, an engineer, who came up with this handcrafted tree many years ago. He made a handful of them. Bliss has turned it into a thriving enterprise.
It resonates with a lot of people, and this year has been the best year ever. We're up 25% over last year, which was our best year ever.
But they're not cheap. Small trees start at $300, while big ones top $2,000. Each comes complete with chandelier crystals and glass ball ornaments. This year, for the first time, most of these trees come with a phone app that allow you to switch colors depending on your mood.
It's what projects and casts all of the shadows and reflections that you see on the ceiling.
His custom-built trees have taken up residence at Disneyland hotels, among other places. He insists they're no substitute for the trees we're all used to, a point he stressed during a school visit.
A little boy in the back of the room raised his hand and he said, well, our family has a tradition of going out and, selecting our tree from the woods. Are you trying to, crush that or prevent that from happening? And I was like, no, not at all. If you have something that resonates in your family, I want you to hold on to that. I'm not trying to replace anything.
He thinks his products, assembled in his home office and available only through his website, help fill a void during these unsettling times. In fact, one customer asked that his tree not be taken down while he was in the hospital.
He said, no, I want you to leave it up because I want to see that tree again. And so they coined their tree the Tree of Life.
Bliss proudly wears his tree and his grandfather on his arms.
I have his signature laser engraved on every tree that I make.
He hopes it brings the same good feelings today that he felt as a child.
I don't think he had any idea that it would go this far. He'd be pretty pleased.
Hendrik Seabrandy, CGTN, Denver.
Well, before we head into a short break now, here's a quick look at commodity markets today. Oil prices were up today. They steadied at around $75 a barrel at some point, erasing the previous day's declines as investors continue to weigh the effects of renewed restrictions in Europe and Asia amid the spread of the Omicron coronavirus variant. Meanwhile, gold prices holding steady today. They were caught between lower bond yields and a stronger dollar as investors watch for signs of how soon the U.S. Central Bank could wind down pandemic support measures when it meets later today. Well, let's head into a short break now, but still to come on the show. More on the young South African that's not just looking at his profit margin, but jobs for his peers as well.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, South Africa's unemployment rate has jumped to a new record of 34.9%. Youth who are entering the workforce make up the majority of jobless people in the country. But with little opportunities available, many young people are starting their own businesses now in order to make a living. With that report, here's Sumitra Naidu.
Rodney Madua comes from Soshanguve, a township north of the capital Pretoria. He gave up his job search in 2013 and started a paint company.
I told myself that I'm just going to, immediately when I get a permanent job, I'm going to get a loan. With the loan that I got, that's why I started the cleaning detergent manufacturing, and then later I started to manufacture the paint.
For Madua, it wasn't just about running a business. He understood the plight of so many South Africans looking for jobs. After getting his paint company off the ground, he started a program for unskilled youth. Madua focused his efforts on providing a professional and efficient service to impress his customers and attract new clients.
Our first client came and bought the paint, and then he also requested the service for us to do the work. We started with the deposit money so that we can be able to go and buy the raw materials. We always ensure that we go all out so that we can give the best service and also give the good quality.
Hundreds of businesses were unable to cope with the impacts of COVID, but Madua's paint company thrived. His quick thinking and agility helped him keep his business alive and all his staff employed.
I think 2021, actually that's one of the years that our revenue grew. We decided that because we have the experience and the knowledge of manufacturing detergent, let us quickly start to manufacture like your sanitizers, your disinfectant, and then that's when then we're able to keep our afloat for the around 3 months where we had a very strong lockdown.
Madua Paint World recorded an annual turnover of $82,000 in 2020. Turnover doubled to $164,000 in 2021. This helped Madua hire and train more people. The company now employs 50 people.
We want to get a bigger space where we can have nice office, and then also we can also have a good space for our showroom where people they can see different products that we manufacture. We have divided our company into 3 entities. We have the first part is the manufacturing. We do all the manufacturing of our paint. We have a team of paint applicators. We also supply the construction companies.
Madua's ambition is to grow his business, hire more people, and become one of the top paint brands in the country. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
And before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currency. South Africa's rand weakening today. Traders say investors are especially cautious as they wait for the outcome of the US Fed meeting and, of course, local inflation data due this week. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling unchanged amid some pressure from dollar demand by merchandise importers. But traders are saying that they see it coming under some pressure this week. Either way. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.